Welcome, everybody. Hello. It's fantastic that you are. Is your brain too full for any more? It's fantastic that you all came in and gave us some time tonight, 6 p.m. after a long day. This is about the third long day for me. It's starting at 2 a.m. because I'm from the East Coast of the United States. So jet lag is just killing me right now. But glad you were able to give us the time tonight and to be here and join us and listen to two distinguished speakers here in just a moment. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a little bit of time up front here. I promise it won't be death by PowerPoint. I'll get through it quick. I have a couple things I want to say. You've listened to brands X, Y, and Z tout their wares to you. I'm going to do just a little bit of that. I'll stay extremely high level, try to keep it a little bit fun, make it a little bit different from maybe what you've heard from others today, at least. Okay. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. And if you know anything about Raleigh, North Carolina, you know that it's kind of sort of a central area for collegiate sports. So UNC, we have Duke, we have NC State. Whenever you move to Raleigh, North Carolina, people want to know which sports team you're going to align with. Well, I lived in Cleveland, Ohio for a long time, and I tried to care about the Browns, but I just couldn't. I moved to Raleigh, the same thing happened. I just don't care about watching sports. But sports provides a rich sort of a place to get metaphors about life and about business. Don't you agree? It's just a wonderful thing. What's better than a good sports story? You may not care anything about the sport, watches sports, but man, who doesn't want to hear about Jim Thorpe and people like that? It's a fantastic thing. What I'm showing you here is something that was done in a certain way for a very long time. Those of you that have some athletics perspective, you know what's going on here. This is a high jump. And this is the way the high jump was done right up until the latter part of the 20th century. This was the way it was done. This was, for hundreds of years, is the way it was approached. See how that gentleman's going over that? Well, somebody had a different idea about how to approach a high jump because this just wasn't getting it done. We weren't going any higher. So in 1968, Dick Fosbury jumped off the wrong foot, so to speak. And by going off the wrong foot and going over backwards over that pole, he won the gold medal. And now I defy you to find anybody in the Olympics who's not jumping just like that. He changed the way things were done. He took a different approach and solved the problem in a different way. How about this guy in 1905? He introduced the special theory of relativity. That was the way his paper was titled. 1905 set the world on fire, didn't it? Changed everything. He took a different perspective on things and explained things in a way that just turned everything upside down for everyone. How about these guys? Lauterbur and Mansfield. They certainly approached what was going on in a different way and gave us the wonderful thing that we deal with today. That's the reason why we're here. Just a fantastic thing. Premier medical imaging approach. Just kind of out of the blue. The genius of these men and some others. Fujifilm also will take a different approach to solve the real problems in MRI today. And I want to talk to you about just a few of those here in the next few minutes. I'll go quickly through it. I'm going to stay high level. Drs. Golestani and Dr. Tannenbaum are going to give you the detail. I want you to really give your attention to them. But let's talk about a different way to solve the problems of today, the real problems. Things like patient infirmity and special needs that patients would have. How about growing MRI volumes, the technologist shortage, radiologist workflow, and patient empowerment. Patients more than ever today have the ability to choose where they're going to, or really force where they're going to get their care from. It matters. Reimbursement in the United States is somewhat tied to patient satisfaction. These are important things today. And Fujifilm has a different approach to approaching these things and solving them. Let's talk about patients with infirmities and special needs. Hey, you know what? We're getting bigger. People are getting bigger, especially in the United States, the Western world, but the rest of the world's catching up. people are getting heavier and heavier. And that's why Fujifilm has equipment that manages patients as heavy as 660 pounds, 300 kilos. We can manage on that table, no problem, and scan that guy. And by the way, scan him with his wrist comfortably at his side so that we're not asking him to assume a difficult, uncomfortable position to enable a good scan. How about somebody who's nervous about getting a scan? You know, there's not that many people that are actually claustrophobic. A true claustrophobic person can't be in this room, right? They're going to want out of this room. But all of us have a little bit of anxiety about being in a closed space. The open MRI system that Fujifilm pioneered has really been a boon to the population that just has a very difficult time with MRI. How about a child? Pediatric application for our open MRI system is a wonderful approach because I can give this child a situation where mom or dad can be right there with them throughout the scan. But it extends also in an unexpected ways. How about this? Here we have our Synergy MRI system. Watch that coil. You've never seen a coil that went on the patient's head like that. Up until now, the coils that were available were all this kind where it just sort of slid over your head, and it's like if you put your head in a bucket, essentially. We've got a different idea. Our idea is to have a coil which closes around the patient's head. So when they lay down, they don't necessarily have to see something that covers their face even. Look at this. I can do it full, half, or open, and just suffer a little bit of signal-to-noise ratio degradation. And by the way, I've got the tools today to make up some of that signal-to-noise ratio degradation, don't I? With deep learning and other things that we'll talk about in just a moment. Try to find another company that's offering this kind of an alternative approach to a couple of things, to workflow, that patient volume issue we talked about, and also the patient's choice in the matter, the patient's empowerment and their infirmities. What about those other things I mentioned up front? The growth of volumes. This right here shows you how MRI over the next 5 to 10 years expects double-digit growth. That's in the United States. It's probably even higher outside of the United States. The point is more and more people are needing scans, and we've got to be in a position to take care of those folks. Technologists, workflow and their workload and their experience, the shortage of technologists is becoming a real problem in the USA. I imagine that's the same worldwide. Radiologists are expected to do more today, far more today in a given day than they were in the past. How do we help with that? And finally, again, patient empowerment. Nobody wants to get an MR scan. You know that? Nobody wants to be in there. No one raises their hand and says, I'd like to have an MR scan. So what are we doing to make things as comfortable as possible and as fast as possible for patients? We need to be asking ourselves that. Here's where AI comes in. You've heard about AI all day yesterday, the day before, last year. What is AI today? AI for the Fujifilm MRI products is extremely significant in a couple of ways. You see right here where I've got K space, I'm going to reduce the amount of K space through some method. Our method is called IP Rapid. Everybody's got their way of reducing the amount of data we collect. We found out that long-standing kind of trade-off you had between signal-to-noise ratio and scan time and resolution, that trade-off's gone. I've been in MR since the early 1980s in one way or another, and I always had this assumption about scan time and signal-to-noise ratio and resolution, didn't you? It's done. It's gone. It's a whole new paradigm, and it's just amazing to me every day. A tear comes to my eye when I see a T2-weighted brain that's done in less than 30 seconds, because I remember when it took 15 minutes. What a big change. What a big change. And here's the thing about the Fujifilm approach. Is this an expensive add-on? No. It's standard equipment on our high-field MRI systems. When you buy a Fujifilm MRI, you get the deep learning capability. Thank you for that water you're bringing me. What else can we do? What else can we do about throughput and patient motion? What happens when a patient moves today? This is the other frontier we've got to solve. The crazy thing about MR, among other things, is we tell sick people a couple of things. Hold still, hold your breath, and don't move, whatever you do. That's what we've been doing for years. We have to do that. Well, it's just kind of nutty. we try to make the patient conform themselves to my data acquisition method. Wouldn't it be a better thing to conform the data acquisition method to the patient? Well, that's what Fujifilm is doing in a lot of fronts. One of them is with computer vision. Dr. Tannenbaum's going to show you some more deeper detail about this, but just understand that you can't see much from this close up here. So let's get a little closer. Fujifilm's 1.5T, our Synergy 1.5T, and by the way, this feature was just FDA cleared yesterday, provides a camera at the back of the magnet and at the front of the magnet. So up here and back here, I've got these two cameras. During the scan, I can monitor the patient while I'm collecting the data, and I'll do an analysis of that monitoring and see where there was motion. If there's enough motion to alert the technologist, I'll set an alert for the technologist, but I can also, after the fact, rerun the reconstruction, and the deep learning reconstruction will go back and take out those bad K-space lines and put good K-space lines in there, saving my scan. So this case, I've got a situation where perhaps I didn't lose the scan. It's bad to tell an already moving patient to hold still. No, I tell you to hold still. Why didn't you hold still? Can't do that. But I can capture the scan even if they do move this way. So we talked about a number of things, the patient infirmity and special needs, how we're handling the growth of MR volumes. That deep learning reconstruction allows you to go faster and keep the image quality what it needs to be. That's going to help us with the volumes. Technologist shortage, one-touch operation of the system. That's also a fundamental capability of our MRI systems. Radiologist workload. This is going to be helped by the other things that deep learning does in terms of reducing those artifacts and making it to where the radiologist doesn't have to save those images do the tough images at the beginning of the day and do the best ones at the later part of the day, but doesn't have to think about that, doesn't have to triage them that way. Make the images good no matter what. And take care of patients such that they'll come back when they need a scan again. They'll make sure that their referring physician sends them back to your provider. Are you worried about helium? How about that? So Fujifilm has introduced with the Echelon Smart a zero liquid helium magnet that you'll see come on the marketplace in the coming months. Outside the United States for first. This is a 60 centimeter system. Who knows what the future holds for the United States? I just want you to think about Fujifilm a little bit differently. I've given you a couple of tastes of things that we're doing. Come by our booth, talk to us, get some more detail about it. But just now, I want to turn your attention to our distinguished speakers. And the first one who's going to be talking to us is Dr. Larry Tannenbaum. Dr. Tannenbaum is a longtime supporter of Fujifilm and a user of the Fujifilm products, and is one of the principals of the RadNet Corporation. So we're glad to have Dr. Tannenbaum, and he's going to talk to you about how advances in AI and computer vision are helping with the patient experience and workflow. All right, Dr. Tannenbaum.
I can't follow that. Who was that guy? Oh my goodness. And not one mention of film the entire time. All right. So that really was an absolutely wonderful introduction to some of the concepts that I will lay out for you over the next few minutes. Sean, you talked about the radiologist perspective and putting the bad cases first or the bad cases last. The way I look at it is if the images are pretty and motion artifact free, it's a lot easier to read. When we open up a case and it's noisy and it's artifacted, we sigh and we stress and we fret. Whereas we open up a case that is gorgeous and glossy and high resolution, it just takes the stress out of all of us. And that is something that resonates with every one of us on the reading side of this particular business. All right, so just a little bit of an introduction as to what is AI and where it fits into society and the healthcare enterprise. We know that AI is basically a tool that lets computers emulate functionalities that we thought were confined to humans. We do know that this AI is all around us. It is absolutely creepy. I open up Instagram and it's showing me Singapore places. how the heck did that happen? Okay, it's really, really creepy. So we know it's everywhere around us, right? We know what's going on in business. In 2017, only 1 in 5 companies used AI. By 2022, it was half. And 60% or more of all businesses plan to increase investment in AI. If you look at the results from the World Economic Forum, 1 in 4 companies say AI generates at least 5% of their income. And 70% of companies report a significant positive impact to their bottom line from the use of AI. If you look at these tools here, can you see the mouse on the screen? Yeah, you can see it. You can see between big data analytics and machine learning exercise and the broader category of AI. These are the key technologies to impact healthcare way back as 2019 and earlier. Now, we know what's going on in AI. We have tools that can help you detect breast cancers. They can better identify lung nodules. They can identify the team that there's a stroke going on, pick up large vessel occlusions, compression fractures, incidental fractures from the ER, pulmonary emboli. We know these tools are out there. And at this point in time, we do know it's not a shock to us. Computers are better than we are at image recognition and pattern recognition. Computers are actually better than we are at speech recognition right now. None of these are shocking concepts. The most interesting piece of late in the AI landscape are these large language models, these foundational models, which can be trained on data and produce completely different skills across the board. And the one we have most experience with is question answering, but now we know we can get image generation and video generation from these tools. These are big deals. And in the healthcare enterprise, this is essentially, as a starting point, natural language understanding writ large. We know about all of these individual models. Okay, this is not the most recent version of my talk. That's so interesting. It didn't get uploaded. But we know that Bard has changed his name to Gemini. That's how I know. So I know this is not the most recent slide. But we know about these large language models, the ones that we've all played with, the ones that are basically affecting my day-to-day search as I go through things today. And of course, the Llama one, which helps in the research setting because it can work on premises. We also know how strong these models are. I mean, if you look at these standardized exams, it's done pretty well. This is GPT 3.5. This is GPT 4. You can see the scoring rate. And this is a well-publicized article that showed that it passed the board exam. On the other hand, like most things in AI, we hear one honeymoon story, then we hear a little more information. And the most recent evaluations of these large language models produced a relatively disappointing performance on the in-service exam. So, ChatGPT actually gets more stupid as it goes along because it is trained to learn from us. Okay. And the more idiot responses we give it, the more stupid it gets. And this is but this is not sarcasm. This is reality. All right. So nonetheless, with, some of these will be potential. Some of these are actualities. A lot of use cases where AI can make an enormous difference in the imaging enterprise. Everything from improving utilization management, identifying patient no-shows, post-processing, registering data. I've had colleagues that have told me that on a complicated liver oncology case, it can take 20 minutes to get the images registered so they could engage their brain and start to interpret the examination. So registration is a big deal. Segmentation is a really sort of a core capability of deep learning. And we see a lot of that in quantitative neuroimaging, which can maybe become very, very important over the next year or so as we start to image more and more patients with early Alzheimer's disease. We already talked about predictive AI and image interpretation, but things like reporting, there are tools that are almost industry generic, but marketed by a few companies that will actually write the impression on your report after you dictate the body of the report. That same skill can actually make a version of your report for the neurosurgeon and the general practitioner or the patient. And even more importantly, for the health of the imaging enterprise, you can identify patients who have been given recommendations for follow-up. 1, compare those recommendations against standards, and 2, compare those recommendations against what your risk says, whether those patients have actually come back for follow-up. So across the enterprise, we have a lot of impact on this particular circumstance. The one area that we're going to talk about for this presentation is going to be the impact on automated acquisitions and scan time reduction in the MRI. So what's my perspective? My perspective is of RadNet. RadNet is the largest provider of outpatient imaging examinations in the US. We have 370 brick and mortar centers. When you hear RadNet, sometimes people think teleradiology. That's not what we do. This is a 35 to 40-year-old company that is still run by the same radiologist who founded it in California so many years back. 370 brick and mortar centers, over 10 million exams per year in 8 states, and currently expanding in Texas with over 10,000 employees. As the chief technology officer, and that's a funny title for a position to have, I'm really the chief imaging technology officer. I watch over all of our advanced imaging, all of our processes. I have a different perspective than most folks. And for our success, and my mission is to focus on the patient experience. And you can see from these numbers, which came from a large multinational patient study, the ratings that patients give the imaging process is pretty low. But patient satisfaction matters. Sean mentioned that it can make a difference in reimbursement, but regardless of that particular factor, if patients are happy, they come back. If your patients are happy, we provide a good patient experience, your volumes go up. This has been documented. We know this in our souls, but we also know it because it's been published. If you go to that same patient survey, you can see that patients don't like the MR scan experience. They don't like anything about coming to diagnostic radiology, but they certainly don't like MR. They say it's at best it's uneventful or pleasant. At worst, it's scary and painful. And if you look at the literature, it can be relatively harrowing to go through an MR experience. They either get fear, anxiety, a loss of control and abandonment. 30% report real anxiety reactions. Forget about claustrophobia. Just in there, suffering real anxiety reactions. And again, the less comfortable patients are, the more likely they are to move. The more likely they are to move, if you don't have tools that help with that motion, the more likely those exams will go even longer. It's really a very unfortunate, vicious cycle in those circumstances. So you heard a little bit about the open MR, and you can hear an awful lot about safety in the open MR. So I sort of squeezed in a little module here on this, and mostly because we have about 40 of these systems in RadNet. We are 100% committed to patients who really need this unique environment, patients who may be claustrophobic or anxious or larger, or even the pediatric patients you saw beforehand. So we're very, very committed to this particular piece. And here you can see why. These are RadNet patient satisfaction surveys. The purple and gray bars are met expectations or exceeded expectations for what you would get in the MR scanner. When it comes to the noise, comfort, and length of exam measures on this particular device, 70% say the noise levels either met or exceeded expectations. I assume those were hopes rather than expectations. Comfort, again, 85%, and the length of the exam, 82%. So this really is a patient-centric device that we have very heavily invested in. That's enough about the open system, except for this. This is the newest open system. This is a broadband version of the system you saw beforehand. This is when we're turning over the first RadNet, one of these, and I'm very distressed to see that I look a lot skinnier in this particular picture than I am now. So the diet starts tonight. All right. So what else do the patients ask for? They want us to get the scan right. First time right is really important to patients. Think of yourself as a patient. Okay. Do you want to come back twice? Do you want things to be done twice? You want to get it done right the first time. And that really is the fundamental tenet behind virtually everything that we do. And all the enhancements you'll hear about tonight are all about finding a way to get it done, to be resilient to the things that really happen in real life. All right. So here we're going to talk, and for the rest of the time, about how AI tools are going to impact on what we do. And we're going to start off with how can AI get us to avoiding repeated scans? Now, there's a couple of things that we're seeing in the industry, and it's really exciting to see that the Fuji folks have integrated that into their scanners, and that is deep learning driven autonomous scanning. There's really a good way to get it right and make it easier to read, because it's the same as it was the last time, is let some kind of an AI engine drive the scanning. And some of that, particularly in the environment where we don't have enough technologists, we don't have skilled technologists, we may even be operating these machines remotely because we can't get folks, which slightly dilutes the quality of the interaction with the machine. to get simplified, error-proof user interfaces. And this is a really nice example of essentially a one-touch auto exam process. I think there's music playing, but I don't think it adds much to the joy of this particular presentation. This is sped up, but you're actually seeing the end-to-end process. There's that really unique head coil design, which frankly, I think is really very nice for patients who are claustrophobic. You don't get that, Hannibal Lecter type feel. You can see that this is done with a very simple auto landmarking and an auto exam process where it's already chosen the exam. You can see it's already doing the pre-scan. Little bits of time like this make a difference to a patient. Anybody who's ever been a technologist knows that if the machine goes quiet, that's when people get claustrophobic. Now, you can see this is sped up 32, but the actual time clock in the upper right-hand corner is not. So these exams are getting all done. They're getting partially automatically processed. This patient is going to go in the machine and finish the entire exam and be out of the machine in less than 7 minutes, which is absolutely remarkable and incorporates the one touch, the auto exam, the things that make it more likely to be first time right. All right, motion resist. Motion is a big deal, right? And this does seem, we've attacked motion a number of different ways, but this seems to be a really nice area where AI is about to make a difference. We know that motion is a very big deal in clinical imaging. You can see my friend Jalal Andre published this particular paper. They showed that repeat sequences was seen in 20% of MRI examinations, more commonly in the inpatient side, but still very significant on the outpatient side, and estimated the cost per facility per year due to motion of $115,000. That's about 150,000 Singapore dollars. You heard about the cameras. There's a front camera and a rear camera, and it actually watches the patient. You can see this patient breathing in the respiratory cycle. You can actually see when the patient starts to get uncomfortable, starts to move, it sends out an alert. Hey, patient's moving. That gives you the opportunity to stop the exam or counsel the patient if you needed to. But it also gives you some other opportunities. Oh, I can't seem to advance because of this video. Here we go. Here's the patient just sitting there breathing and we're filling in case space. And the patient starts to move. There are bad views. There are bad passes through case space. Wouldn't it be great if the machine itself, the algorithm itself, noticed this motion, had the ability to remove those bad case space lines and then fill them in intelligently instead of filling them with zeros? Wouldn't that be a nice thing to have in these circumstances? We could take an image that would have some motion and we read through it, radiologist stress, perhaps some hidden pathology, and turn it into something that looks like that. And they're calling that still shot. Pretty impressive stuff. This was almost certainly a volunteer. This was what the volunteer looked like when they didn't move. This is what they looked like when they did move. And this is how the ability to creatively fill in the bad lines of case space restored this image to the quality that you'd expect. Here are just some other examples from the clinical trials that got this software through the FDA. Would it look like this? It's pretty good. Would it look like that? I'd read through that. Why would you want to if you didn't have to? Again, even in the abdomen, this is an abdomen exam. It's not great. Patient didn't hold their breath well. 18 seconds is kind of longish. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just correct that? That's extremely cool. And as a radiologist, you just don't have to read the garbage and patients don't have to come back. Here's another one, typical artifacted image. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to clean that up and have it clean up automatically? I think that's really the key piece here. Again, resiliency, first time right. Easy on the patient who doesn't want to be there. Easy on the radiologist who doesn't want to read a bad exam, and easy on the technologist who is, again, overwhelmed and stressed as it is, because with deep learning, we're doing 3 patients an hour. We're doing 4 patients an hour, and repeat scans are even more problematic. So again, just another nice example with carcinomatosis. Again, we're doing a relatively nice recovery for this particular image. And here's another case with some other artifacts, again, nicely reduced or eliminated by the actual algorithm. So these cameras, front and back, really impact on a number of different exams, brain exams, knee exams, abdomen exams. It can be in the traditional lighting circumstance, but dropping the room lights down doesn't really interfere with the ability for this to work. So it's exciting stuff, in my opinion. Now, by the way, we all know that you can use non-Cartesian trajectories when you know there's going to be motion. It's very common to use these trajectories in brain imaging, but it's not common to have the deep learning reconstruction be available for those those non-Cartesian trajectories. And this really is state of the art, and it is not at all ubiquitous in the MR industry to have that. I'd argue there's really only two companies that are currently offering that, and Fuji is one of them. So another scenario that your technologist would know about, you may not know about them because you may not see them. Most of us are physicists, but if you are a radiologist, you may not know this is going on, but at the scanner, this is a problem. Patients going through the scan, they're uncomfortable. Finally, they say, get me out of here. We already saw it, get me out of here on the earlier film. And then we end up with nothing, right? The same AI algorithm can say, you know what, I can use AI to predict the appropriate signals from those lines in K-space, not fill them with zeros, but use AI to fill those in and end up with an image that you can read. So that same technology that can remove lines that are motion can also fill in lines that are missing. And this, again, just gets you to the point where you think it takes 15 minutes to do a knee exam, and it will take 15 minutes to do a knee exam. And that's a very important piece. Other things we get that keep us from getting it just right. There are times when we just don't design a scan with parallel imaging properly. Field of view wasn't right. The amount of alias, the amount of parallel imaging acceleration wasn't right. We end up with artifacts. They've come up with something called IQ Retouch to give you the ability to retrospectively adjust the field of view, so to speak, and take a scan that would have had this artifact that needs to be repeated and just be able to correct it, all retrospectively. I don't have any of my scanners that has the ability to do this retrospectively, and it's just simply a tool you can go ahead and dial up the appropriate change in the field of view and end up with something that would look like this due to this artifact and turn it into something that looks like that without that artifact. Again, just the types of things you'd like to have that you would expect from a state-of-the-art, high-field scanner from a serious MR manufacturer that knew what we needed at the point of attack, the ability to go ahead and save exams, prevent artifacts, and actually salvage artifacts that would have needed a repeat exam. So we talked about these things. Starting off with the ability to adjust the field of the amount of acceleration in the field of view, you can deal with unpredicted motion with still shot, abdomen, head, and theoretically anywhere. If we know the patient's going to move, we may use radial trajectories or modified radial trajectories. And we can use deep learning for that as well, which I think is almost unique in the industry. Only 2 companies able to do that right now. And then when a patient just can't do it, we can make it easier on them and still salvage that examination. So that's a big deal. All right. What the patients really want is to get out of there fast. They don't want to, any bad news, but they want to get out of the machine. Okay. Sometimes it's just get me out of here. Sometimes it's not healthy to be in there. This was a New York Mets pitcher that was held in the Superman position for so long on this examination that was done in a New York City University hospital, famous for orthopedics, that just was looking to get the most incredible exam, I presume. 90 minutes in a position. This pitcher said he was on the disabled list 2 weeks longer because of that positioning. So it is not just comfort goes into areas that can make a difference to your actual income, let's say. So at this point, we pretty much know AI in image reconstruction, deep learning reconstruction of MR images, probably, actually, ask ChatGPT, they'll tell you this, the biggest thing that's happened to medical imaging in 25 years, or the biggest thing in AI. But, ChatGPT only says that because I wrote an article on it and only reads what's out there. Here's the article I wrote back in 2021. Okay. I have a column on applied radiology on AI matters. I write very few of them, so they're actually relatively insightful and interesting. But this is one that my colleague, Dr. Bash, and I wrote in 2021, which showed the impact of deep learning reconstruction. And it's only even more exciting that we're expanding this, as we go along. So what does deep learning reconstruction do? It gives us very powerful denoising, so powerful. We've never seen anything like this before this in MR imaging. It does all of this while preserving resolution, increasing sharpness sometimes, and certainly boosting contrast resolution, which is a very big deal. The first level of this type of reconstruction, Fuji calls IP rapid, but it's essentially an iterative reconstruction process. And we do iterative reconstruction because it helps us recover some of the signal that we lose when we do parallel imaging. As you can see here, as we go to higher parallel imaging factors, the image integrity is still maintained, but we start to get noise. We can use this iterative reconstruction process, which not only cleans up the aliasing, but also cleans up the noise to get an image that looks, that maintains the signal that we expect. Here you see the top line without deep learning reconstruction. Here you can see, actually without AI reconstruction, IP Rapid isn't strictly deep learning. You can see that it actually maintains the signal very nicely. So the iterative reconstruction piece, very nice job at improving signal to noise. Here you see a couple of examples from 1.5 Tesla scanners. Here's a typical suite of MR applications that took a respectable 16 minutes and 42 seconds using IP Rapid to reduce the scan time, maintain the signal. The Fuji 1.5T scanner was able to bring this down to only 8 minutes. And that's, that's pretty respectable for 2024. And this is even before they get to the deep learning level of reconstruction. Now, I have the greatest experience myself using IP Rapid on our open systems. And there's some experience of ours. Here's a patient with a calcified meningioma. You can see the type of quality that we bring to bear on a day-to-day basis on that 1.2 Tesla magnet. You can actually see the kind of scan times we got on that magnet system before we added AI-based image reconstruction and what happened afterwards. We got a nice respectable drop in time on the brain, a more formidable drop in time on the cervical spine and the lumbar spine. We get about 30% or so there. Here you see the type of quality we're able to knock out on the 1.2 Tesla system with this tool using IP Rapid to make our scan times faster. Here's just a representative lumbar spine, typical 5-sequence lumbar spine that you'd expect to see in a routine practice, the exams from 2022. And then for musculoskeletal, we've also get some pretty nice results. We're taking our shoulders from 14 to 11, knee from 16 to 10, ankle from 12 to 10. It's a very respectable boost in speed brought on by the broadband velocity system, augmented by the rapid technology. And here you see some nice experiments that we did before we turned the system over. Our standard protocol might have had 355, 240, 141, 301, but you can see it went from 255 to 144, 240 to 140, 141 to 102, 301 to 212, respectable scan time savings with essentially identical image quality, which is really one of the themes we have here. You can see these images look great. I mean, they look like any 1.5T high fidelity scanner using deep learning reconstruction. Very respectable techniques. You can see here our standard image and what we're able to achieve on the velocity with IP Rapid. You see we've gone 431 to 226, 304 to 209, 335 to 200, 304 to 130. So it's a really respectable scan time savings. And this is the type of quality that we're just knocking out every day, with this new IP Rapid reconstruction. Now, again, I mentioned IP Rapid reconstruction is powerful, but it's entry-level stuff where the excitement really comes in as we start to use deep learning reconstruction. I have an asterisk there to remind me to tell you that this was just FDA cleared today, and it's currently on the 1.5T product, and I've got to wait a while before it gets to my open systems. We'll talk more about that later, Sean. But this is what it looks like. This is the big boy scanner, the what does it say? Echelon Synergy. Yes, the Synergy. I couldn't read the Synergy without my glasses on. And that's the Synergy scanner. You'll be seeing a lot of images from that over the next few minutes. But on the Synergy, you get DLR clear. And DLR clear essentially adds your typical convolutional neural network-based denoising and sometimes sharpening to the iterative reconstruction process we've already talked about. And you can take an image that looks like this and turn it into that. These are the same images, just processed both ways. Obviously, this image is accelerated, which is why you see the noise, but you can see the net result. Really sharp, gorgeous low noise, really excellent preservation of detail. It's a wonderful thing. And you can see, like any of these tools, the fundamental substrate is you need to accelerate. Once you've accelerated, you can use these tools, deep learning reconstruction, to either give you a better image at the same resolution in enormous drop in scan time. How much at the same resolution? 44, 55, 66. That's substantial, right? Or you can take some of that speed and turn it into a elevated standard of care. And that's a theme that we see across the board. Deep learning reconstruction has allowed us to be more focused on patient comfort, be more economically sound with 3 to 4 patients an hour, but also allowing us to, across the board, elevate the standard of care. Some areas you can dream about, things you never could do before. In most cases, when a radiologist looks at the pre and post, they want the deep learning reconstruction version. Again, some more examples from the reader study that went to the FDA. Same example, accelerated image. I think pretty remarkable impact on this particular study. Again, look at the difference in sharpness here. Again, standard, new version, lower noise, slightly better sharpness, really nice quality. Radiologists who have to read these scans, they just love a low noise image, not to mention the clinicians that receive these scans who are blown away by this type of quality. Again, same type of thing. This is what it looked like with acceleration. This is what it looks like with cleanup. Patient with metastatic disease. Acceleration, deep learning reconstruction. Accelerated prostate, a little noisy, deep learning reconstruction. Look at that contrast resolution. Look at that edge resolution. It's a gorgeous image for routine day-to-day practice. Again, these tools denoise. The absence of noise sometimes makes radiologists nervous. It looks too smooth. They don't see the noise. The absence of noise is not smoothness. Look at the sharpness there. Okay, and that's really the key piece here. Not only do I actually preserve real sharpness, but in some circumstances can substantially enhance sharpness. Again, same type of situation, standard image, processed with deep learning. I mean, yes, there's less noise in the bladder. But look at the sharpness. Again, look at how much sharper this bladder cancer is than it is, with the standard reconstruction. Truncation effects, again, can be corrected with AI. You know how many companies are correcting truncation effects with AI in the AI industry? 2. And the second one joined today now that they've been through the FDA. Now, the truncation effects can be subtle, but they can be just absolutely screaming at you. And here you see ringing on a 3D image, and here you see a spinal cord that's actually half its normal size because of truncation effects. So again, as you heard from Sean, the DLR Clear actually has been trained to reduce truncation. Now, we have truncation filters in day-to-day practice. We all know that they throw out the edges of K-space. So even though they do a reasonably good job at reducing that truncation effect, they throw away spatial resolution, so you get a softer image. This is what DLR Clear looks like with the truncation filters off, and this is what an image looks like with the truncation filters on. Clearly looks sharper with this tool. And if you actually do the same experiment, truncation filter on here, so we've lost a little bit of the sharpness in theory. Here is the DLR Clear version, which doesn't need the truncation filter. If you subtract the sharper one from the less sharp one, this is all the data you've thrown away. So turning on a truncation filter tosses this in the trash. So if we can do this without the truncation filter, we get free sharpness. It's, no extra charge. Again, this is what a bad truncation looks like. The truncation filter is off here. So it just got bad truncation effects. This is the same example processed with DLR Clear. Anybody who's had to do troubleshooting around the MR scanner for an entire enterprise knows what this looks like. And we know how that happens. So again, what does truncation look like? Well, it's here. I mean, I don't have my glasses on. You see little lamellations. You see a little bit of an artifact. You really want to see what it looks like? Let's subtract the DLR Clear from this. And look at this. All of these echoes, all of these ringings here are all the truncation that we have in an image. We don't use a truncation filter. And using the truncation filter, as you saw, makes a sacrifice that we don't want to have to make. Again, it can take an image which looks like this and turn it into that. It's pretty cool. Truncation can be really egregious or it can be subtle. We see it here. Radiologists learn to look at this, right? They learn to ignore this. Okay. IP rapid, it doesn't take away a lot, but look what happens with the DLR Clear. It's gone. And it does that without throwing away the spatial resolution that I told you lose when you use the filter. Again, pretty subtle, but you can see the 3 rings here. A few more on here somewhere, a few more over here. Let's focus on those. Pretty much gone. Actually, I wasn't supposed to show this one. I pulled this one out because it didn't explain well. All right, so here's another one. we don't just see it in the brain, we see it here. You see these 3 rings here? It's there. It's on all of our images, just producing enough garbage. And this is, by the way, with the standard truncation filters on. Look at that. Gone. So, bringing my contribution to a close, I think you've seen how a focus on patient-centric imaging is also a focus on technologist-centric imaging, which is also a focus on the needs of the radiologist. These are tools that not only increase the volume of patients who want to come to you, but also de-stress the people who work for you, allow you to increase retention and make life less stressful and reduce burnout. If you're just an MR geek, as I am, you just appreciate the better image quality, the greater consistency, and the less garbage that we have to put out because of the fact that we're really working in real circumstances. So I appreciate the folks from Fuji giving me the opportunity to sort of wax rhapsodic about the things that I care about in imaging. And now you're going to hear about some real science from my colleague on the program. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tannenbaum. And I kind of butchered his title. He's CTO, Director of Advanced Imaging, and Vice President of RadNet. So just wanted to clarify that. Next speaker here is Dr. Golestani. Dr. Golestani is Assistant Professor of Biomedical Engineering at Northwestern University. And Dr. Golestani has been working for a long time on the vertical field and implant behavior. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sean. It was a fantastic talk, Larry. It's really hard to compete and give the second talk after that, but I'll try my best.
We'll send Sean up there again. Carol.
I do have grant support from Fujifilm. So yes, we're going to talk about implants today. And usually when I give this talk, I spend a few minutes convincing people that this is an important conversation that we all should be having. But I guess if you are all here and at 7 p.m., instead of enjoying Singapore, it means that you're all convinced that this is an important discussion to be having, so I don't need to convince you. So this is just a slide with some numbers if you want to convince other people that this is something that they should be looking into. And I have to apologize in advance. My stats are from United States, but I think that they expand and translate to the whole world. So as we speak today, there are more than 12 million Americans that they carry some sort of medical device in them. And that's a number that goes up by 100,000 each year, which is a steep growth. And it's projected that this implant medical device market is going to reach 150 billion by 2027. So it's a huge market. Main driver, of course, as you can guess, the aging population and the prevalence of chronic diseases. There was an interesting report by NIH that came out in 2015, which basically said that unfortunately, although we live a lot longer, we do not live a lot healthier. So it means that we will have more and more patients with neuromodulation, with neurodegenerative disease, and with cardiac problems. And these are the patients that need constant monitoring. So these are the patients who are getting neuromodulation devices and cardiac pacemakers, and they will come to you. And 75% of them, they need a scan at least once during their lifetime. So that's going to bother your technologist and your radiologist, because they have to make a decision whether or not it's going to be safe to scan these patients. Now, a little bit of MR physics, which I'm sure everybody knows about. Let's think about what could potentially go wrong when we put a patient with a conductive piece of metal in an MRI machine. So there are 3 fields that we should be worried about. There are static field, gradient field, and RF fields. Now, main magnetic field, most of the, and again, we're not talking about, in this talk, I'm talking about what we call active implantable medical devices, or AIMD. So these are electronic devices. I'm not talking about orthopedic implants. Most of modern AIMDs, they have very negligible amount of ferromagnetic material. So force and torque is not something that you are terribly concerned about. Gradient field, they used to be really problematic, specifically for cardiac implants, because they would interfere with the device. They would make your pacemaker pace the heart at a rhythm that it shouldn't do, so it could induce arrhythmia, would be fatal. Not anymore. We have a much better technology, safeguard switches that put these devices in MR mode, so basically takes care of that interference problem that caused the device to malfunction. What remains as a nuisance is the RF field that produces the heating. So what is this issue of RF heating? It's what we call, as engineers, I'm an electrical engineer by training, this is what we call an antenna effect. And when I want to talk to and kind of teach my students to visualize it, I always say, imagine what happens if you forget your spoon in your microwave. And I think everybody in this room probably has done at least once. And you start seeing those sparks, right? So what happens is that you have these long cables for these electronic devices, like cardiac pacemaker. You can think about a long lead for a pacemaker, or like a spinal cord stimulator, and you expose them to an oscillating electric field. So what we call is that the coupling take effects, and these electric fields induce currents in the internal wires of these leads. And these currents go back and forth. They can't do anything because these leads are mostly insulated. So they don't go to the tissue along the length of the lead. The tip of the lead is usually what is exposed to the tissue, because that's the part that has to deliver the therapy. So these currents go out to the tissue, which has a low conductivity. Basically, it's more resistive, and they produce a huge amount of local heating. Bad things could happen. We have already done really bad stuff. 2005, we burned a patient with a deep brain stimulation implant, underwent MRI at 1 Tesla, and basically had this huge burn due to local heating and didn't survive. So what we can do, before I start talking about vertical scanners, I want to tell you a little bit about my background and myself, because I have spent the last 10 years of my career trying to address this issue from any possible angle. So anything that you can think of, we have actually thought about and tried. And I want to tell you a little bit about things that we tried to make this problem go away and why they haven't been successful. One thing that we tried in the beginning was that we said, okay, you know what? We are MR engineers. We are the people who build these systems. What if we actually rebuild the system from scratch and make it compatible with these patients? What am I talking about? So if the electric field is what causes the problem, can I build an MR transmit coil that has a region of a very low electric field? Look at this blue region. And then mechanically turn the coil around the patient head or around the patient body in a way that the implant is contained within low electric field region. I'm not changing the magnetic field. The magnetic field is something that you need to produce an image. You cannot mess up with that. But I don't need the electric field. It's just a nuisance that comes because of Maxwell equations. Tell me whenever I have magnetic fields changing my time, I will have electric fields. I can do things with electric field. We convinced National Institute of Health to give us money to actually build the prototype of this coil. Before doing that, we did a lot of electromagnetic stimulations to show that, yes, in theory, if you have a transmit coil with a region of low electric field, which is this slab-like blue region, and you turn it around the patient head, this is a patient with a model of a deep brain stimulation implant. When the coil is positioned in a specific position that the implant is contained within the low electric field region, you virtually eliminate the heating. Well, that's awesome. We got the grant. We built the first prototype of this local head receive transmit coil at 1.5 Tesla. This is how smoothly it will operate on a patient. This gentleman here in the coil, by the way, is my husband, who was the first person who was imaged with the coil. Of course, when you build something that you don't know how it works, you use it on your family members. And it produces nice images. You know, it works well, and it reduces the heating substantially. I'm showing the heating as the function of the angle of the coil. This is a much nicer, much professional looking version of the coil that we built for 3 Tesla. And what I'm showing here in the graph is the heating of the coil compared to the body coil. So if the coil is positioned in the optimum angle, it's going to reduce the heating by more than 95%, which means that virtually get rid of the heating. Awesome. What's the problem? The problem is there is only n equal 1 number of this coil existent in the world, and this is the one that we have it. So as much as I love to see it everywhere, I'm sure that it's not going to help any of your patients. So this is not something that we can hope that's going to be everywhere in the world. It's very expensive. It's hard to operate. If you don't use it right, you're not going to get the benefit of it. So we thought about other approaches. Okay, so what we can do to make it easier for everybody to use it. If we don't change the MR technology, if we want to stay with the MR technology that we have today, are there other things that we can change to make this heating less and the whole process safer for patients? This is when we started thinking about, okay, let's go talk and work with surgeons. There are people who implant these devices. Maybe the way that they are implanted can be modified in a way that these devices interact less with MRI field. And this is something actually very interesting. And it was kind of a fishing expedition, I should admit. We were just simply looking at RF heating of deep brain stimulation implants. These are CT scans of our patients with DBS devices. And what we did was we replicated these scenarios in phantoms and we measured the RF heating. What we found was that there are certain trajectories that heat up significantly and consistently less than others. And one thing that I want you to pay attention is that you see that there is a huge patient-to-patient variation in trajectory of these leads. The reason is that there is no surgical guideline how to put this extracranial trajectory of a DBS lead. Basically, surgeons do whatever they want based on the practice that they learned. And that causes a huge variation, which is really very interesting. So what I can tell you is that if you give me a piece of device and I put it in a tissue mimicking gel and I put it in a magnet and I measure the heating, I could get, let's say, 25-degree heating. I just need to turn it 90 degree, the same device, the same environment, and it's heat up less than half a degree. So trajectory matters a lot because that's what tells you how efficiently the lead is going to couple with the electric field. So we're thinking, okay, if that's the case, let's just find out what are the best trajectories and then go talk to surgeons and tell them, hey, can you implement this low heating trajectory so it's going to be safer for your patients to get the scan? And again, we get a bonus too, because when you reduce the heating, you also reduce the image artifact. Because, remember from the physics that those currents that produce the heating, they also produce a B1 plus that kind of messes up with your imaging. So you're going to kill you're going to kill two birds with one stone. You're going to get lower heating and you're going to get less image artifact. So in fact, when my PhD students spend a lot of time looking into all possible trajectories and then devising surgical guidelines for doctors to implement them. And I have to warn you, the video that I'm about to show, it's a little graphic because it's showing how a DBS surgery is done. Basically, for this specific device, we advise the surgeon to make certain amount of concentric loops in the extracranial trajectory of the lead and put it in a specific position around the burr hole. And when she did that, actually, we found a substantial reduction in the heating. Again, awesome, but good luck convincing your surgeon changing their practice just because you want to scan your patient. I'm very lucky. I'm working with two amazing neurosurgeons. They are MD, PhD, so they are open to research. But again, I don't think this is something that we can easily convince many people to do. And that was around the time that by kind of lucky chance, I got introduced to these open bore scanners, which happened to be vertical. And I want to tell you the story because that's an interesting story. I was a junior faculty at the time in Massachusetts General Hospital. I was scanning in a Sunday afternoon. And a friend of mine who's now the director of the MRI core at Mass General, he basically came to me and said, hey, I have a friend in Hitachi, and Fujifilm, the OSC system was owned by Hitachi at the time. And he said, yeah, I have a friend that works with this open bore vertical scanner. And it seems that their RF field is 90 degree rotated. Do you think that your electric field is going to be, electric field, of course, it's going to be different. Do you think it's going to have a different effect on implant heating? And I was like, heck, it should. I will be surprised if it doesn't. So we got curious. We got back to his friend. Basically, we asked them to give us a model of the coil of that scanner, and we started looking. So we looked at a particular type of implant at first that's called a deep brain stimulator. Just for you, if you don't know what DBS is, I'm going to give a very, very quick introduction. It's a neurosurgical technique that you implant an electrode deep within the brain, mostly in basal ganglia, and then it's connected to a long lead that again gets connected to a long extension, and that extension goes connected to an IPG implanted in the chest. Now, there are MR conditional DBS system for horizontal scanners. It's not that they don't exist. The problem is when you look at the conditions, they tell you that you have a limit on the maximum B1 plus RMS. For example, the Abbott system, which is the one that's implanted in our patient, doesn't allow us to go above 1.1 microtesla. This is what I got from my technologist in our Memorial Hospital. All of the scans that we want to do, they have B1 plus much more than what the manufacturer allows us to do. So they are MR conditional on the paper, but the conditions are so stringent that practically we can't scan them. That's the problem. So the first thing that I do, again, I'm an electrical engineer and a nerd in terms of I love simulations and I look at electric fields and magnetic fields, and the only way that you can see them is to simulate them. We created a model of a patient with a deep brain stimulation lead, and we just looked at the amount of SAR, which is the specific absorption rate of the energy at the tip. And we saw a substantial 20-fold reduction in SAR in an open bore vertical scanner compared to a horizontal. And again, these scanners these models are both adjusted to produce the same amount of B1 plus. So we are fair in terms of putting the same amount of power in the coils in both of these two coils, but one of them produces so much lower local power. And when we looked at the distribution of the electric field along these leads, we actually found something very interesting that you can see. The electric field happens to be much more tangential to the trajectory of the lead in a horizontal system and much more orthogonal in an open bore system. Instead of me asking my surgeon to change the trajectory, it seems that there is a system out there that just have the right orientation of the electric field. So we don't need to do anything. We can just scan our patients using the scanner with just luckily good type of polarization. And again, we got excited, but this is just N equals 3. Maybe that was a fluke. Maybe it's just, with these specific 3 patients, I get the results. Who knows what happens in the general population? And I remember that I went to Sean and I begged him to support us to actually do a larger scale study and look at a big group of participants. And by the way, all of this work is published and openly accessible. I'm a very big, advocate of open access. So you can just go and read everything freely. You are not behind the paywall. We already paid for that. So the second study that we did was a larger scale study in patients with DBS devices. We got 90 patients. We basically went to our neurosurgeon. We got CT scans of these patients. We segmented the trajectory. We recreated these models in simulations, and we looked at the result. And the result and this is the statistic result. This is not just, a handful of patients. We are talking about 90 plus patients. And this is actually very interesting. 30-fold reduction in local heating in DBS system again, at the time it had a Fujifilm Oasis system compared to 1.5 Tesla horizontal system. The second question you might ask is, okay, if everything is so dependent on the relative position of the patient in the coil, what happens if you need to do an abdominal scan? What if I move the patient inside the coil? And that's what we did. The second thing we looked at was that, okay, let's move the patient. Let's look at the position when the chest is at the isocenter. Again, 23-fold reduction in the RF heating. So the advantage remains even when you move the patient. One interesting question, the Oasis system is a 1.2 Tesla scanner, which means that the Larmor frequency is around... No, not you, Sean. Anybody wants to tell me what is the Larmor frequency at 1.2 Tesla? You have calculators? What is at 1.5 Tesla? 64, so a little lower, 53 megahertz, right? So there are two things that are different. There is a field polarization difference and there is a frequency difference. Which one has the effect? How can I know which one is more effective? Well, there's an easy way to know. We just retune the birdcage coil, a horizontal birdcage to 1.2, meaning to 53 megahertz, and looked at the heating. Still a huge difference. What does it tell me? It tells me that the frequency is not the main contributor. It's the field orientation. The fact that these fields are 90-degree rotated, that's the one that actually causes this reduced heating. And again, this study is published in MRM. And, these are all simulation studies. I love them. They give you a really good insight, but you should never try simulation. You always have to go and actually do stuff in the scanner. So we worked with some medical device manufacturers. We got a commercial deep brain stimulation device. We created this anthropomorphic phantom that basically mimics the human body shape and material, because it's a multi-material phantom. And we scanned the device, and with optic probe, we could actually really measure the amount of heating that happens. And this is the results of comparison. These are actual experimental results in the scanner. Again, as you can see, more than 4 times, actually more than around 10 times reduction in the mean of RF heating. Okay, all great. The results are published. What about other patient populations? So that was around the time that I actually had my son, and I was obsessed with what happens in pediatric population. And what can we do to address the problems in the pediatric population? 1 in every 100 child is born with a congenital heart disease in the United States. Now, these children, they get CIEDs, cardiovascular implantable devices. Now, if I or you, we need a CIED, what we will get as an adult is what we call a endocardial system. So endocardial system is when the IPG is implanted in the chest. The leads are passed through the subclavian vein and go to the interior surface of the heart. Now, you cannot do that in an infant, just the veins are so small that you're going to clog them if you do it. So what we do is that we use an epicardial system, that the IPG is in the abdomen, and you sew the lead to the exterior surface of the heart. Now, the problem is that there is no MR conditional epicardial system available. We have looked into RF heating of these devices in 1.5 Tesla scanner, and they heat up tremendously. They heat up to 15 degrees, and that's enough to produce lesion in heart of an infant, and that lesion is going to grow when the infant grows. So we again created models of pediatric bodies, and we looked again in stimulation first. What would a vertical coil do in terms of RF heating in such a case? And well, stimulations were very promising. We saw a significant reduction. The same thing that happens with DBS seems to be happening here too. Very recently, we completed experimental results. We actually created, again, thanks to Medtronic, who donated a vast repository of cardiac devices to us. We recreated models of cardiac implants in phantoms. And here you can see, again, a significant reduction in RF heating in vertical system compared to horizontal system. And this is something that I want you to pay attention to, because this is really important. 20-something degree is the amount of heating that if you expose a child for 10 minutes, you're 100%, it's not a doubt that you're going to create a lesion, and that lesion is going to grow. Now, I apologize for the intense text, but this is just something that I copy-pasted from one of the grants that we recently applied. What would you do? Most of hospitals don't do MRI on these kids. Then it means that they have to do something. It's not that they don't do any imaging. They send them for X-ray, for CT, or for fluoroscopy. We worked with our Lurie Children's Hospital. It's a huge children's hospital in Chicago. We have a large repository of these children with and without devices. So we did a study that what happens when a child does have a CIED. And basically, we could show with the statistics that these children are 4 times more likely to get radiation, ionizing radiation, because they have to do CT and they have to do fluoroscopy. So we know that this is causing cancer in these children. So these are just the stats. We can't do MR. So we expose these children to ionizing radiation 4 times more, and that's bad. The alternative is even worse, because there are people who are so desperate who say, okay, we'll do MR no matter what. And then studies like that come out in 2020. 40 patients with epicardial leads, we did MR, nothing happened, meaning nobody died. And then you go and read the whole paper, and then you see that there's a little footprint in the discussion that says, by the way, 3 patients experienced heating sensation and we needed to stop the scan. Well, this is me and my son. He's a healthy child, but if this was my child and you scanned him, he wouldn't complain that he's burning. He would just burn. And I could get the phone call that, sorry, your child didn't survive because he was too sick, because these are sick children. So if we scan them, we would burn them, and we might really, that could be death sentence to the child without us even knowing. If we don't scan them, we will expose them to ionizing radiation. So this is really a bad choice to have. So I just want to conclude my talk on a brighter note that knowledge saves lives. We are really thankful to the support of Fujifilm that actually allowed us to do the type of experiments that shows that there are safer platforms. So if you are really, really desperate to scan these children, at least do it when we know that it's safer and doesn't expose them to that much harm. And thank you so much for staying here so late. And if you have any question, I will be happy.